Good evening, and welcome to Monday, February 2nd, 2009 Planning Board meeting. Tonight, we do have two public hearings on. Before we get to the public hearing, we do have approval of the January 5th, 2009 minutes. Any board members have any corrections or any comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion's made. Second. And second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes, those minutes have been approved. The next matter will be the minutes for January 22nd, 2009. Any of the board members have any comments on the January 22nd, 2009 minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve those as well.
Motion to approve.
Motion's made. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes yes. Moving along tonight, we do have two public hearings. One is 62 Lewis Street, which is the Holy Trinity Church, and the other matter is 106 Marginal Street. I received communication this afternoon that Mr. Gentleman on the board will not be able to be here this evening due to a work commitment. He has to travel out of town. Is either the applicants on either of these matters requesting a continuance due to the fact that we only have two board members? If so, I'll entertain that motion now instead of waiting for applicants to go through a public hearing and then come forward.
Mr. Chairman, James Flood, 81 Bridge Street. Representing Brassy Development. We have a special permit in front of you tonight which requires 4 votes, so I'd rather present it in front of a full board instead of just 4 members. So I'd request a continuance till the next meeting.
Okay. What I'm going to do then, Council, is I will read in for the record for the public hearing, the advertisement, and then we'll take up your motion for continuance, okay? This is the matter which is 106 Marginal Street. A public hearing will be held to hear all interested persons relative to the application for Brazy Development for site plan review, special permit, and definitive subdivision approval of a project located at the above address. The proposal includes the construction of 6-story, 171,092 square foot residential building containing 110 dwelling units at 185 parking space lots and landscaping to include on-site stormwater management. An additional 35 parking spaces are provided on the ground floor of the building for a total of 220 parking spaces. Access to the site will be made available by a new 2-way road proposed from Middlesex Street through the parcel of land located at 1291 Middlesex Street. The 180,753 square foot, approximately 4.2 acre site is located in the industrial zoning district and requires site plan review under section 11.4, special permit under Article 12. This project requires planning board approval under the Lowell subdivision of land regulations due to the construction of a new roadway. Due to the fact we only have 4 board members present, the applicant is requesting a continuance due to the fact under the special permit, the bylaws require that the planning board has to approve that by 4 members of the 5-member board sitting. There is a request by the applicant to continue. What's the request of the board?
I make the motion, Mr. Chairman, to continue to our next meeting, which is a Thursday, February 19th.
February 19th.
I'll second the motion.
Motion's made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes
Thank
yes.
you.
Thank you, Councilor. Getting back to the regular agenda, the matter for public hearing is 62 Lewis Street, which is Holy Trinity Church. A public hearing will be held to hear all interested persons relative to an application by Hellenic Housing, LLC, in the Hellenic Orthodox Church of Lowell for site plan review of a project located at the above address. The applicant proposes to raise 2 existing residential buildings formerly owned by the Lowell Housing Authority adjacent to the Hellenic Orthodox Church located at the above address. The proposal includes construction of a parking lot in place of the raised buildings, providing a total of 55 parking spaces, and includes a central green space featuring a gazebo. The 37,261 square foot site is located in the urban multi-family zoning district and requires site plan review under section 11.4. May we hear the case for the applicant, please?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Jeff Cook. I'm the architect for the project. I'm going to do a brief presentation of what we're proposing here tonight, and then turn it over to my engineers that can explain all the details to it and so on. We've worked over the last 13 years I have on this project, from doing the entire street on Lewis Street for parking. The church needs the parking. With time, the historic boards worked us into a position that we're all happy with on our side here of 55 spaces. The church remains a center island that has a monument or a gazebo, let's say, type of development, plantings and so on. It's a project that's well worth the time and effort, and we're hoping that you'll approve it. I'm going to turn this over again to the engineers that can explain the details of what they're proposing and any questions you have. If you want, I can answer some of your questions now, but this is up to you.
Well, you can turn it over, and the more information we get, the more questions you might have.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I introduce the team too? Have them introduce
Whoever wants to speak, they can, or you can have them all rise and introduce them at one point in time, who's present with you, and then they can come up as one individual each and introduce themselves to the board if you like.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Ryder. I'm an engineer with Cuco and Cormier, with engineers with offices in Tewksbury and Nashua. As Mr. Cook mentioned, the main focus of the project is to create some off-street parking. Right now, this part of the site is occupied by two buildings that were previously owned by the Lowell Housing Authority. We are planning to remove those, and we're having one entrance in this location, which will be a one-way in. This is an existing entrance, which will also be a one-way in. Traffic circulation would be through here and then out the center aisle in front of the church. Drainage is being handled on-site with deep sump catch basins with oil hoods, and then going into a underground infiltration and retention system with an overflow tied into the town system. Landscaping will be provided along the back and along the sides, and significant landscaping in the center green area here. Again, as Jeff mentioned, we've got 55 spaces where none existed before. So we're confident this would be a major improvement, particularly with the safety and the traffic flow on Lewis Street. I can go into more detail, bore you to death if you would like, but if the board would like to ask any questions, we'd be glad to entertain those at this time also.
What's the two addresses that are going to be taken down on Lewis Street?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what the address numbers are on Lewis Street that are going to be removed?
No, I don't. The addresses for the two buildings coming down?
Okay, right. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, if the board has no other questions for me right now, I'd like to introduce our legal staff, Danielle.
Sure.
And she can go into some of the other issues.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to come a little closer, if that's okay.
Absolutely. There's either a hand microphone, or you could use that one in the corner there and push the green button if you'd like. Whatever's more comfortable for you.
Okay, this is a,
You have the green button on?
yep.
There you
Okay.
go. Okay, thank you.
As you can see, this is a very complicated title background to the site. There are 17 different parcels that are being consolidated here. These are currently owned by the church, these here, and the city discontinued Jefferson Street, so this northerly portion of Jefferson Street is now owned by the church. The rest of the parcels were previously owned by the LHA, and the Housing Authority has then since conveyed them to the Hellenic Housing Trust, which we are leasing then to the church. And this is all comprising the parking lot area here, and these are the two buildings that are to be demolished, and here's the church. So you can see it's a lot of parcels that are being consolidated.
So, excuse me, there's two buildings, front and back?
These are the two here.
All right, and then there's another one right on Lewis Street.
This is the church.
Yeah. There's another one right on Lewis Street that's boarded up as well, right now. To the right there. That's,
The Lowell Housing Authority has an easement to be able to maintain these two,
all right, they're just boarded up.
so.
Anybody else want to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is George Zaharoulis. I reside at 15 Dabby Way. This site and the plans that you have before you have been in the works is almost as far as I can remember, about 20 or 30 years. The parcels that are involved, one building is parallel on the street, and the other building is parallel to that building. There are buildings a little further up the street. This is a key piece, I think, to the acre. First of all, the church itself is a historical structure. It is, as far as my understanding is, it used to be a cathedral. Also, we have in that same vicinity one of the oldest Catholic churches, St. Patrick's. In between the two is a spot that's called Ecumenical Plaza. This plan is a very exciting plan that it's going to bring together, I feel, two pretty large communities in the Lowell area. I think it's going to be a showcase, the way it's been outlined, or at least the plans that I've seen have demonstrated that it's going to be just one of these outstanding. It's going to take some of the curse off the parking around the church and around St. Patrick's Church as well, because most of the parishioners do park on both streets, Suffolk and Lewis. By having this parking area and gazebo, it opens up the whole neighborhood, and I think it's just going to be a fantastic thing. It's a betterment to the area. It also promotes the health, safety, and convenience and general welfare of the inhabitants of the city. I think when people go walking through the acre, this is going to be another gem, as the Moolis Markets did up on Fletcher and Broadway. It opened that whole thing up. And it's going to enhance everyone that's down there. Those buildings that were replaced, and if you look at them now, they're old, tired buildings. They really don't have a historical significance other than the purpose that they were first put into play. I'm excited to see this happen. I'm a parishioner there, and I've waited a long time for these plans to come forward. And I think the plans that you have before you are just plain outstanding. I think it's going to handle some of the water problems in the area, and I'm very excited, and I hope you look favorably upon this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zaharoulis. Anyone else like to speak in favor of the project?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board, my name is Mark Goldman, 58 Oakland Street, Lowell, Mass. And as the previous speaker has said, that this project has been talked about for many, many years. And this will be a complement to the acre revitalization plan that was produced a few years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak in favor of the project?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Franz Sagendorf. I am the manager of Hellenic Housing, LLC. As a little background on this project, when I became involved, I know other people have been more involved going back 20 years, Jeff Cook for 13 years. I became involved approximately 4 years ago in this project when there must have been, let's see, when I got on board, there must have been 80 revisions to a plan of what would the church would like to see occur on this site. One of the major impediments to going forward with this site was to get an agreement together with HUD, the Lowell Housing Authority, the church, and Mass Historic to first remove these two buildings that currently exist. They're 9-unit buildings each. One sits right on the street and one's behind it. In order to get that agreement, we had to agree to certain things. One was we had to replicate, what the term replicate, but build 18 new units of housing to replace the 18 units that we wish to remove from this site in order to make parking for the church. So that took a while to do, but we did build 18 new units of housing at the intersection of Adams, Fletcher, and Suffolk Street, because we needed a site that was near North Common, but yet could accommodate 18 townhouse-style units with parking on site. We finally found that site, which was a costly site to do because there were numerous off-site issues that we had to do with the infrastructure. The utilities were running through the site, which should have been moved years ago, and they weren't. So we had to redo all of the utilities to the new site, including put water shutoff valves where they didn't exist in the street. But having said all of that, we went before the historic board on this project and had numerous revisions with them as to what they wanted to see in terms of the streetscape. So we are at the point where we have constructed those 18 units, and now we're before you for your approval on the project to be. And what we wanted to show just on this existing plan was how we're trying to take all of these sites and, consolidate them into a very workable plan that we believe is good for the neighborhood and is very good for the church, because for so long they've been without parking. And it's been a major problem for them when it came to funerals and weddings and church services, that it's just been a tremendous burden to them not to be able to have any parking. So that's where we are today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak in favor of this project? In favor? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Anyone like to speak in opposition? In opposition? In opposition? Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Before I turn it over to some of the board members, could I just, we have a couple of comments that we received from some of the department heads. I don't know if the engineer from the applicant had a chance to look at any of these. If so, could we address those one at a time? Basically, I'll go through the ones that, just as everybody knows, usually whenever we get a set of plans, the copy goes out to all the departments, and departments do make comments on them. So just to go through quickly, Conservation Commission has gave us a letter of approval. Water Utilities has gave us a letter of approval. Police Department, letter of approval. I believe we received an email from Captain Weber from the Fire Department with letter of approval. We did receive a couple of comments. It's in regards to the Lowell Historic Board matter. We do have a copy where a historic permit was allowed on April 18th, 8 with conditions, and they outlined 4 of those conditions. You there on that meeting? Mr. Lockhart is our representative from that board. You recall this coming before you, Rich? And this is basically what's happening. They gave these conditions with 4 conditions, as indicated. So the historic
Pretty
board
standard.
has approved it with basic conditions. Do you have any comment on this, Rich, regards to these conditions? or-
No, other than we saw it and we all liked it and thought it was a good quality
Okay.
piece of work.
So moving along, we do have a couple ones with comments. We had one from Jeff Gomes, the transportation engineer. He indicated that the description has stated that there are 4 handicap spaces, proposed that there are only 3 on the plan. The 3 handicap parking spaces shown on the plan are sufficient, but the description, the plans should agree either way. So do you have 3 or 4, or, he's saying either is sufficient? You can approach, sure. Probably better with the last plan. So he just said there's a little inconsistency in regards to 3 or 4.
I believe we actually have 4 with the van, one of them being the van. So, in either case, we can simply make the adjustment.
Okay. And the other one he had is, Mr. Gomes indicated that he recommended church parking only signs on Lewis come down since they have a large parking lot and do not need the existing space anymore.
On that one, Mr. Chairman, we would prefer to keep those signs. There's only 3 of them, and they're located right in this area, immediately adjacent to the church. My understanding is when we first started working on this site, we had come up with something like 75 or 80 spaces is what the church really needed. Working with the Historic Commission and other agencies, we eventually were cut down to 55. So we would certainly like to be able to retain those 3 on the street.
And the other matter was, he said curbing should be VA4 vertical granite curbing. Do you have any problem with that?
Again, most of the curbing on the site, we've been calling for slope granite curbing. The main entranceway here, we're calling for vertical. As I'm sure the board knows, there's a considerable difference in cost between the vertical and slope granite. And we would, prefer to be able to use the slope granite on the majority of the site.
If you're going to use the slope granite, could you point out to me where you're requesting that be? You're saying so the vertical would be, the vertical
Basically,
granite would be coming in?
We have curbing all along the edge of the parking. And what we would like to do is have slope granite along the outside and along this edge here with vertical on the main entranceway here.
So keep the vertical going in and then the slope in the back?
Correct.
Because usually the main concern on that is when you do the plowing, how you hit it and break it. But
Exactly, yeah.
if you keep it to the back, it might not disturb it as well?
That and, the slope granite will stand up to the plowing better. It's less expensive. And we, obviously this is having already constructed 18 units of housing, this is a relatively cost-intensive project, so we'd like to save a little bit of money wherever we can.
All right, thank you for that. The next matter we'll take up is, we have from Mark Young from the wastewater utilities. He'd like to have the developer pick up the city's 4 CBs that connect to the sewer system and tie them into the new proposed drain. The city would then accept responsibility for the drain and outfall on Lewis Street.
Yeah. We actually have a phone call into the wastewater division trying to set up a meeting, but in general, I don't believe we have any problems with that.
Okay. And the second one, there are drains in the area that do not show where they connect to or what they tie into. One CB is on the southerly side and is on Lowell Housing Authority property with a drain line heading towards the new parking lot. The other is on the northern side and shows a drain manhole but with a sewer line. We'd like to see any drainage connections to this line be moved and connected into the new drain system. Is that a problem in the new drain system?
No, in fact, there are 2 or 3 existing catch basins out there that will be abandoned anyhow as part of our new drainage system.
And the last comment we had from Mr. Young was, finally, we strongly suggest removing proper filling, the abandoned 12-inch sewer main?
Yeah, we have no problem with that.
Okay. So you concur basically with all the ones from the wastewater utilities?
Yes.
Okay. And then, I think, did you receive a copy of Lisa DeMayo's report on January 22nd? Had some comments on some of your sheets. Did you have a chance to look at that?
Yes, we did.
Do you want to just comment on those briefly instead of me reading them to you, whichever one's you? Basically, it starts off with the driveway permit, and then it goes down to sheet 3, 4, 7, and 8. I knew that the driveway permit's new, I believe was in the paper yesterday,
Right, yeah,
explaining it to our residents.
in general, we had actually already met with Mr. Mayo before we filed with this to make sure that we had everything squared away with her. And again, we didn't have any issues with
Okay.
any of her comments.
Okay. I think most of them are just, it appears to be just the engineering matters to be tweaked one way or another.
I would classify them as house cleaning type.
Okay. So you have no technical, okay. I also know that we did receive a letter from Division of Planning and Development. Aaron, anything you want to comment on that? I know one question came up was regards to the variance for parking spaces. There was a question of whether the 55 had to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I believe, Aaron, you had a comment on that. Could you elaborate on that a little bit further, if you would, please?
Yeah, I was just looking at the plan, and there's, the applicant is requesting variances for 2 different dimensional requirements from the zoning code. One of them is for the number of parking spaces. By code, they need 56, they're providing 55. But in this case, it's an existing non-conforming building. They've only got 7 parking spaces, they're increasing it to 55. They're lessening a non-conforming structure. So it's my feeling that they don't even need to go for a variance for the parking, and they're increasing it 8-fold. So that's a process that they don't necessarily need to go for. The other one was the side yard setbacks. Again, the building was existing. They're not changing the lot line. They're not making it, I shouldn't say they're not changing the lot line. They're not making it any less non-conforming, or more non-conforming. It's double negative. But, so those 2 variances aren't necessary in this process. The other 2 do remain. So it was just more of a comment on procedure than anything else. Maybe save you some time.
Thank you.
Okay. You must be happy to hear you don't need the variances.
Certainly do.
So you have no objection not going for variance if they feel it's grandfathered in, you won't have to go for another public hearing, okay? I think that concludes all the comments we received from the department heads. I think you responded to all of those. At this point in time, I'll turn over to ask any of the board members if they have any questions or concerns.
I have a few.
Okay, Mr. Lockhart?
I do have just a few quick questions, but I just want to say I agree with Mr. Zaharoulis about the impact on the acre that this development will have. I think it's a beautiful piece of work, and it's going to be highly visible, and those things, they catch on and they grow, so I congratulate you on that. And I really like the way you put together the piece of property and the multiple lots into this workable piece. It's, I think, quite unique and just a good job. Having said that, I just got a few questions. One, can you just point out your snow storage area? It alluded to that on...
There's a couple of small areas where we'd be able to have some snow storage. One would be in the green area around here, right, and a little bit over in this area. Our plan is, once those fill up, and they certainly will when we have a winter like this, we'll be trucking it off-site.
Okay. Can you describe your fencing and also the operation of the gates and how you're going to handle maybe emergency access for whatever reason?
For that, I'd like to have Jeff Cook, the architect, address those, if he may.
The operation of the gates are, they're going to slide horizontally, like you've seen them around town here, I'm sure. They're on the rollers that go down a round track all the way down. During times when there are a lot of people there at the church, they'll be open. I'm sure the major parishioners will have gate openers and so on for it, and to specific parties. It's a fairly straightforward scenario. That pretty much a decent explanation?
I think so, yeah.
You see them at the grocery stores and stuff.
What about the fencing? Can you describe that and point out where that is?
The fencing runs around the entire, other than where those gates are, around the entire perimeter of the development. The one that's short is 4 feet tall, goes on the front of the, on Lewis Street itself.
Street side?
And then the taller one that's 8 feet goes around all the rest of the back of the building and the 2 sides.
Some material?
It's going to be galvanized steel, not dipped, not cheap, last forever.
What about your lighting, your outside lighting, its impact on the area?
The lighting is, I can't see it from here, but there's little circles that are shown along, and some of them are doubles when they're against, like, the center there where the monument area starts and the other.
Mr. Cook, if you want to go up and point them out to him, you can. Go, feel free.
And they're pole mounted, correct?
Yeah. And then just, that microphone over there, just make sure the green light's on so other people can hear you. Yeah, just pick that one up and just hit the green button if you would. Thank you, sir. As long as,
Hello?
there you go. Whoop.
These are doubles right here. It's a light pole that goes up around 12 feet, high density. The bulbs or the lenses around this big. They'll cover a good area of all the way around. These ones here that butt up against these 2 buildings and over there will be shielded so that the light doesn't go back onto off of our property. It would remain on our property. That's pretty much the that there. This here and this here and this here are where these gates slide back and forth. And this one would go this way, and this one would go this way, and that one will go that way. Does that pretty much explain it?
Any further?
Just one other one. There was, in our report from DPD, there was a mention of a large elm tree, maybe 4 foot in diameter.
Yes.
Located on the property, and
There is.
how you might work that into your existing plan, and that relates obviously to landscaping, and you are seeking a variance for landscaping within the parking area, is that correct?
Correct.
So there's really 2 parts of that question.
Right. I do have a letter that I received from Leo Garneau. It should be in my bag there or something. He went and looked at the tree. Did you get copies of those reports? Do we have them here, any of them?
You're going to run out of wire there. Be careful.
I want you
They won't go much further.
In essence, the roots are up out of the ground. It's an elm. It's, believe it or not, around between 30 and 50 years old. It looks a lot older than that. The roots are literally coming out
Oh, they're up on the surface.
on the surface,
Really?
and it's right up against one of the sidewalks. The other thing is that he dug some holes out there, and the soils are, you've been there, they can't even grow grass in that area there, and he said it's between 30 and 50 years old, and its days are numbered as it is. I'm supposed to
So
meet
you're
with
not going to be able to say it, obviously.
No, and with time it'll get a fungus, and according to his report here probably, and there is some on it in a couple of areas, but the root literally is sticking out of the ground because there's no real topsoil to save it. And if we put one in that was that big again, we'd lose half of our parking because there's impervious surfaces.
And the variance for the landscaping within the parking area?
Pardon?
The variance for the landscaping within the parking area, you're seeking that?
Yes. Yep. We've got a lot of that landscaping in there, but
Can you just give me your reasoning? I mean, why you can't meet that?
I don't know. have we got?
Ms. Lockhart, the reason we were request the section of the zoning that we're asking for a variance from requires that in a parking lot of this size, every so many spaces, we have a finger of landscaping that comes out into the parking lot. And what would happen in order for us to comply with that is we would lose additional spaces. We felt that the landscaping that we were doing around the perimeter plus the green area in the center of the site would more than make up for the lack of parking, lack of landscaping within the parking area. Also, the drawing that I've just put up there, we did take a look at what would happen to the site if we did try to save the tree. This is actually the location of the tree, and drawn relatively, it's actually a little bit smaller than the size that Mr. Garno said the root system was at. And you'll see that we lose all the parking in this area here, and in order to keep our traffic flow, we would have to swing the travel lane up in this area, and we'd also lose the parking that was along that area, so.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Mr. Fischett, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, just briefly, also just a comment, that's actually a dramatic spot when you stand there and you look across at St. Patrick's Church, and I think obviously the visible green space, the Hellenic structure, I think is going to add a lot of dramatic appeal to that particular location. I am somewhat, and I understand the rationale regarding seeking the waiver or variance of the landscaping requirement for the parking, and certainly I understand the intent of that in our zoning code. I have a tendency to agree with the fact that the landscaped area with the Hellenic structure is a fairly large area that is going to create a sense of green space within the Todd location. A question regarding the exit that you have alongside the church, and it looks like herringbone, it looks like pavers. Is that going to be a different color, or is that going to be?
It'd be a different color, different texture.
Yeah.
So you'll have the landscaping. You'll have the different color from that from that structure as well. I'm just trying to picture that visually. I like the change in texture, obviously. That's for safety purposes and also, I think, aesthetics.
The aisle that runs between the garden there and the church is all smooth cut cobblestones. The church has talked about having people donate one and have their names carved in it.
That's a great way to raise funds, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The monument itself is big. It's from here to the wall over there, it's 18 feet tall. That's all in granite also, with the columns being smooth and the sleeves and so on being carved. When we get down to grade level, that whole area that's out beyond it is all marble. We've got piles of marble samples in my office right now with numerous different colors. We haven't picked out those colors. I think the church probably spent a little time figuring out the colors, but it'll all be smooth marble.
I mean, certainly, I know I have one that feels very strongly about trying to break up the sea of tar, so to speak, relative to parking. But I think that element softens this location, and really, I think, adds a lot to it visually. So I certainly would be in favor of allowing that variance to go forward. That's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Fischett. Mr. Claremont?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a very nice project. It'll really provide for the space that you need. I just have a couple of brief questions. On the, if you could just describe the traffic flow through the site. It looks like there's 2 entrances, and it's all going to exit through the cobblestone area, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And these entrances will be one way and then one way out?
Correct.
Okay. The exit, is that 2-lane? Is that?
It's
gonna
wide enough for
accommodate-
2-lane, yes.
Wide enough for 2-lane? Okay. And the remotely operated gates, those will be gates at all 3 entrances and
Correct.
egresses? And how will those be operated? Who will be operating them? How will the gates be operated? They say remotely operated. What does that mean?
Were they, let's say, instead of having a key in the door, if the...
If you can just speak to the mic, please, so some people at home can't pick up the conversation. Thank you.
It's, instead of having a key, they're going to have a mechanism like your garage door opener that's going to make that slide to the side. Not everyone will have it, but the priests will, and certain people that are there that have that right to do that, and then it's secured. Of course, during events, they'll be open and left open. Is that pretty much a Reader's Digest?
Yeah, whoever has control, the priests, custodians, et cetera, will have access to be able to open and close those gates.
Exactly.
And I'm presuming that'll only be open during the periods of time that there's services or activities going on.
Exactly. There's another thing that is going on also. There will be surveillance cameras throughout the entire area there.
Will the fire department have the ability to open those gates as needed? They'll have access?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right, good. I have no other questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have too many questions. I think a lot of mine have been answered. I do believe this will be a nice project. Been down there, looked at the project, and studied the comments from all the department heads. The only question I do have, and I think it has been answered, is, Aaron, obviously you'd be willing to work with the applicant for the landscaping for the green space along the site? And I know you had a couple of comments in order. If you could just touch briefly on that. You had a couple of suggestions on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to do that. We also have a landscape architect that the applicants have met with us and discussed approaches briefly in the past. One of the comments I had was that if the retaining of the elm tree was not feasible, and as it appears that is not, that there is an option to add deciduous trees along the edge and over time recreate the canopy that's created with the elm tree that there's now. The other impact of trying to retain the elm tree, Jeff didn't really point it out, but it kind of ruins the form of the gazebo and the trees that they've planting around it. So if that's not working, my recommendation would just be to add more trees along the edge and try to. It's going to take some time, of course, to grow in, but recreate the canopy that way and soften the impact of the parking lot that way. But we'd be happy to work with them.
Okay. Would you have any problems with work on the Division of Plan and Development for the landscaping if need be?
None at all.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions on that. Any of the board members have any further comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
if
go
I
ahead,
may, Dennis Crimmins, one of the other members of our team, would like to have a couple of comments with the board, if he may.
Absolutely.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Dennis Crimmins. I'm an attorney representing the applicants. The staff members' comments are well taken in that there may well not be a need for certain of the variances that we've asked for. We won't know that, however, until we get to the Board of Appeals. If they say, yeah, you do need that variance, I'd ask that any decision, not presuming that we're necessarily going to get a positive decision, but if there is a decision that's written by your board, I would ask that they approve those requests for variances, and I have no problem with stating that it's your board's opinion that they're not needed. I'm not sure what'll happen when we get to the ZBA, so the Board of Appeals, so I would ask that you take that into consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'll let Aaron respond to that, 'cause I think usually it'll be determined before you get to the public hearing.
Yeah, you could actually cut that off the passes. Go see Bob Camacho or Kathy Murphy, the Inspectional Services Department. They will then give you a determination whether or not that really needs a variance. You don't have to wait to go to the ZBA for the board to determine that.
We had some preliminary meetings with them, and after those meetings, we've given them a list of what we thought we might need.
Mm-hmm.
They've never said, no, you don't need that, but they've never said that that's the appropriate list. So they've now seen the same list of variance requests that you've seen. So I'm just saying, I don't want to get caught with having one board say you don't need them, another board say you do need them, and then need your recommendation, have to come back for that if that's the case.
So basically, if I hear you correctly, is if any of the variances are needed, you're looking for favorable recommendation from this board for those variants to be allowed if need be.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's right. Precisely.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
If you apply for the variance, then it'll come before this board just for recommendation. So we won't rule on it, but we'd make a recommendation to the ZBA before it appears there.
We've actually applied, so that'll be, I mean, essentially with the same set of plans and the same list of variances,
We'll see it then.
request has been submitted to the ZBA last Friday. So we're anticipating we're going to have a hearing on that on the 23rd, I believe, at the Board of Appeals.
So usually what happens there is, like, matter of fact, we have a copy tonight of what's on the agenda for the February 9th on the Zoning Board of Appeals. So on all of their items that go before the Zoning Board of Appeals, we get a copy that's sent to us on our meeting prior to, which would be, I believe, a week and a half from now, because we meet on a Thursday night due to a Monday holiday, and we would make a recommendation on those matters, as indicated by Mr. Claremont. They're not binding, due to the fact that we've seen the plan already tonight and know what your requests are. The board will be familiar with those, and at that point in time is when they would require a formal recommendation to us. But understanding what you said tonight, at least we have the opportunity to ask any questions now to clarify any concerns we have. Well, a lot of times when the matters do go before the Zoning Board of Appeal, we don't have the applicant present to give us the input. So at least if this matter comes before us at our next meeting, we'll have the benefit of everything we heard tonight, and we'll definitely keep in mind your comments to attach, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. After hearing that, any of the board members have any further comments of what either I or council has said? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make the motion to approve with conditions, and the conditions that I'd like to suggest is that the applicant continue to work with the DPD on the landscaping that we discussed here tonight. With regard to the comments from the traffic engineers, I would agree that as a condition that the applicant be allowed to use the slope granite in the back of the project as noted on the plan, and use the vertical granite in the main entrance only. With regard to the comments from the wastewater department, I'd put as a condition that the applicant comply with the terms set forth on the memorandum from Shannon Cohen dated January 22nd that you went through, Mr. Chairman, and the applicant agreed. And then finally, with regard to the engineer's comments, I think the applicant indicated that they were mainly housekeeping matters, but I just put as a condition that the applicant work with the city engineer's office to address any concerns on the engineering memo dated January 2nd as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion by board members? Any comments on the motion?
Second the motion.
Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes yes. The matter approves with 4 in favor and none against. Good luck. We wish you well.
But
Thank you. You're welcome. Good job on the plan. This is about the tree stuff. Moving on to new business, we have one matter here, the Hamilton Canal District zoning matter update, and then under old business, we have 1519 and 1527 Middlesex Street. Who's here for the Middlesex Street project? Okay, there. You people here for Middlesex Street? Okay, all right. If the board doesn't mind, I'll take the matter on Middlesex Street matter out of order, so we entertain the people who are present here this evening. So we're gonna move on to 1519-1527 Middlesex Street. The board will review proposed, 1527 Middlesex Street. The board will review proposed modifications made to the approved site plan at the address located above. The applicant is requesting the following modifications to be approved as a minor change to the approved plan. Alteration to the landscaping island located at the entrance, replacing vertical granite curbing located in the parking lot with asphalt berm and concrete curbing along the pedestrian walkway. The board will also review modifications to mitigation plan agreed upon between the applicant and the Commons Condominium Trust. May we hear the case for the applicant, please?
Thank you very much. My name's Jack Sullivan. I'm owner of the Sullivan Engineering Group, and I'm here with attorney George Elitis. I just wanted to briefly talk about some of the on-site minor plan changes that you just highlighted. Originally, this project was approved with vertical granite curbing throughout the project site. Vertical granite curbing has been installed in all areas within the city's right-of-way. On the property itself, we're proposing a Cape Cod berm to be installed in the parking lot area, and along the walkway to the main building, there's proposed concrete vertical curbing. All the locations and dimensions of the parking lot islands are as shown on the approved plan. The one change was at the site entrance. There was a change in geometry on the entranceway to this site. It was more rectangular. When it was approved, it's more triangular in this case, but it provides a better means for access in and out of the site. One other thing that should be noted, I did submit a follow-up letter about a week and a half ago. Along the rear of the property, there was a proposed open drainage ditch. It was going to be approximately 2 feet wide. In lieu of an open ditch, we're proposing to pipe that drainage ditch. That will reduce, any trash that would blow in, less maintenance for the applicant, keep a cleaner site, and still provide the same degree of drainage flow for the project. The reason for these changes are due to economics. Vertical granite curbing, the installation cost is about $25 linear foot. With the asphalt berm, it runs like $3 to $4 a linear foot. Mr. Ahn spent approximately $1.6 million in constructing this project site, and he was trying to, when it got towards the tail end, he was trying to keep his costs down as much as he could. That's why he's requesting these changes through the board. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Attorney Elitis to follow up on the homeowner association agreement.
Thanks, Jack. Good evening. George C. Elitis, Jr., 133 Market Street, Lowell. And I'm here for Master Hahn this evening. I don't know, I have two documents that I think are a portion of this. One of them is the original agreement made with Riney Management on behalf of the Condominium Association. I don't know if Aaron got to dig that out for you folks. I have copies. You do have it. The other is a letter from Commissioner Camacho, who recently inspected the property. There are three principal items that I think we're dealing with here tonight, and I'm sure, as you can probably see from Commissioner Camacho's letter, I think two of them have been principally, well, certainly the air conditioning has been completed, the covering of the air conditioning on the roof. Secondly, with regard to the siding, the issue here appears to be that the association folks want us to side all the way down to the end of the building, not that portion that's just adjacent to their property, which we think is unfair and somewhat unreasonable. Extra expense. Bear in mind that this siding was all placed on the building at their request for their benefit. There isn't anyone else in the world, unless you're running out back of this property, and even then I don't think you can see it, or you can barely see it. For 90% of the people in the condominium, I believe they actually, in many cases, would have to open their window and lean out the window to see the portion of the building that isn't sided, which is close to Middlesex Street. And, you know, my question at this point is, it just doesn't seem reasonable to make this requirement. We certainly wanted to accommodate them in terms of the visual part, so that if they're looking out their window and looking at the back of this building, they're going to see the sided portion. But beyond that, down on Middlesex Street, I think is an unreasonable burden to put on my client. Lastly, with regard to the fence itself, I don't know if you recall, but first and foremost, I think we all have to understand the fence is owned by the condominium association, and it was put up by the condominium association. The only problem is it was put up on my client's property, and it's still on my client's property. And what in essence at this point now they'd like to do, and this was, I'll be honest, we talked about trying to accommodate them at the time. This was subsequent. If you recall, at the hearing, which was a little over a year ago, before the board, we agreed that we would try to work out something that would accommodate these folks. And it took some time to do that. As you can see, the actual agreement wasn't entered into till almost 6 months after that, but of course there were plans and specs that had to be drawn. Fact of the matter is, and I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity to study that situation that's up there, but first of all, if the fence were totally removed, I think it would be extremely dangerous situation there. If the fence, however, were moved closer to, more onto my client's property and closer to the building itself, I think that what we would in fact be doing is looking at a situation that created, number one, a very serious possibility of vandalism or personal injury to somebody. Anyone who might want to climb that fence, which I think the law in this case would refer to as almost an attractive nuisance, could then use their position on top of the fence to try to vault onto the roof of my client's building. Now that creates obviously a lot of different problems, not the least of which is it makes it much more susceptible and easier for somebody to get on the building who might not have the best purposes of being on top of the building. Secondly, it creates an attractive nuisance for somebody who wanted to turn it into a plaything. Can we jump across the opening between the wall and the new building and have some fun and try to get on the building there? And thirdly, the mere fact that you're placing it right on that border there puts a person in a position that if they tried to they could actually be trying to climb that fence, especially in the evening, and not even know that there's a void between the wall and my client's building there. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. The building commissioner, although he did not state that in his letter to you because he wasn't asked that specifically, indicated in a visit that he made up there, and I happened to be present at that time, that it was moving it closer to the building would create a much more dangerous situation. Aside from the fact that obviously at some point we were trying to accommodate them, I'm not sure of the legalities that relate to these folks trying to either A, take something down on this property that they erected themselves, or having a new, even though it's set at their expense, a new fence put further into and closer to our property. So I would ask you, in fairness to everybody, and in light of the building commissioner's examination of the property as well, that that particular fence stay the way it is and not be moved and not create the kinds of situations that I referred to in my earlier comments. I'll be glad to answer any questions. I'm sure we want to hear from the folks here and hear what they have to say, but as I said, I would ask you to understand that that's not the best thing that should be done at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Counsel. Anyone else here want to speak in regards to this project? If you do, just come to the microphone, please, and state your name, please, and your address, if you would.
Not made for tall guys. Good evening. My name is Kevin Decker. I'm with Riney Management. I'm the managing agent for the Commons condominiums at 1541 Middlesex Street. I'd just like to comment on a couple things in this agreement. We did enter in this agreement on June 9th, 2008. You all have a copy. In regards to the vinyl siding, the vinyl siding, then we do have pictures for you if you'd like to see them as I discuss this. The vinyl siding can be seen from the Commons residence in its entirety. The back of the building, I'm sorry, can be seen in its entirety. Not from all units, but from different points of the complex. The complex is in an L at that corner, so the siding at this point was done for the duration of the property line to the fence, but not continued down the building, and was also not continued down to the ground. It was only done halfway from the top of the building down, which is hard to see in these pictures we have because, of course, there's a lot of snow back there.
Could you pass the pictures up if you don't mind, sir?
Yes,
Thank
sure.
you.
Paul.
That way we'll pass them through the board while you're talking, if you don't mind, since you have them. Thanks. Thank you, Kevin.
The issue with the vinyl is that now, of course, we see a stop in the siding, which, you know, the agreement was reached because the presentation of the back of the building and the decks of the condominium are probably roughly 8 to 10 feet away from the back wall of Masteron's building. So at this point, we wanted to create a little bit better look than a concrete block, and that's why we had originally brought it to this board. Our problem is that, of course, now it's an unfinished product to look at, so the siding is not continuous down the building, and you know, you can see where it stops and it becomes concrete, so it's not aesthetically pleasing to look at. The second issue pertaining to the fence that was commented on is we have no intention on, you know, the Commons, yes, owns the fence. We are looking to take an area that is now the fence, as you can see in the picture, is roughly 2 feet off the back of the building. We are looking to eliminate the fence in its entirety, except connect where it ends at the building to the corners of the building, which would then leave exposed vinyl siding and would not allow an area between the fence and the building to be an area for debris, dirt, potential vandalism of people hiding in between that. It creates the sort of alleyway, if you can see in the photo. So our goal was to create a better means of egress for the back of the condominium, not actually to use that land, but we agreed to maintain it in the back area. There would be no object there for anybody to climb onto the building. The height of the building is in excess of 10 feet, is probably higher than that. And so my understanding is, I think the picture was painted that we're looking to move the fence against the building. We are looking to eliminate the fence because it is so close from the decks to the building that it might even be an issue with an emergency situation back there, which I know is in existence originally, but if we have an opportunity to eliminate that fence, it would be a smart thing to do. We are satisfied with the mechanical systems being screened on the building. That condition has been met. All parties are satisfied with that at our last meeting. And I think that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Anyone else like to speak on this matter?
I'm Helen Dolan. I live right behind the new building at 1541 Middlesex Street. And when we came to you in the summertime with these conditions were put into the plan and accepted by the board. And now Masteron does not want to agree to those conditions. However, he constantly states that he is a man of honor, a man of his word, and he wants to be a good neighbor. I feel that the conditions that were placed with this board back at this time are conditions that he agreed upon knowingly before we even came to you. I would like to see him be expected to be a man of good honor, be a good neighbor, and a man of his word, and I would like to see him expected to carry through with these proposals or these conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Board. I'm Paul Willett. I'm also one of the trustees at the abutting property. And just to go over those three items again, yes, they have finished screening in the roof units, but I think it's important to note that it took an additional meeting and additional arguing to get him to do that. He didn't want to finish that task. On the other two items, the fence, I think, as Kevin described, is actually very important. Yes, the fence did encroach on his property, or does encroach on his property. Existing fence, it's been there for about 20 years. And part of our discussions and part of the discussions of trying to eliminate the problems with encroachment and with them building a new strip mall next to a residential building was trying to deal with the issues of how it's going to impact property value, how it's going to impact security. And one of the things that was very important at the time was the fact that along that side of the buildings, there were old growth trees. So all of the people with decks on that side of the unit during all of the warmer months, the only thing they could see looking out that side was green. So we were hoping to keep that. At some point during the construction process, the contractor came in, cut down all of the trees without notice, including some of the trees that were not on his property. Understandably, it took some time for us to calm down the rest of the owners because everything nice about their decks just went out the window. So that started that negotiation process of what are we going to do to try to improve this relationship. And one of the things that we had asked for was replacement trees, different ways to make the appearance of the building more suitable, different ways to reduce the impact of, say, lowering property value by having a retail building so close. And after a great many meetings and going back and forth, we came up with these three items. And the three items were arrived at by concessions on both sides. And of course, one of the big concessions was the loss of those trees and the fact that we did not take action against him for essentially stealing the trees. So out of that came his agreement to not press for any kind of easement problems or removal of the fence or any other issues with the retaining wall. And now the retaining wall is buried. It's no longer an issue. And of the other two agreements there, the fence was to be removed where it abuts the building, and the edge or ends of the fence were to be tied to the building to ensure that security that everybody's worried about. People running back and forth in there, trash, being able to jump on the building or break into the units. I'm not sure you're aware, but we've had 6 break-ins over the past few months. That's kind of rampant in this city right now, but we're hoping to prevent that. Once you remove that fence, which is something that he agreed to, obviously not covering the back of the building with siding is going to create an eyesore. It's going to reduce the value of the properties because of what they look at when they look out there from their decks. So those two items, removing the fence and securely tying it to the back of his building at the corners, providing the fire department with fire access at both ends so that now there's no security issue there. They can get in with equipment if they need to, and covering the entire back of the building with vinyl siding, and according to the agreement, with vinyl siding in a color that was approved by the board, approval which he's never bothered to try to get. So at this point, after making that agreement near the end of construction of this property, now we hear that it's unreasonable. And now that we hear that it's unacceptable. So it kind of leads me to wonder if there was a great deal of integrity involved in making that promise at the outset. So, for those reasons, for security, for the appearance, for the fact that there was an agreement entered into with good intent that now doesn't seem to be honored, we would like to see the board hold him to this agreement and hold him to the expectations of the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else want to speak on this matter? Hearing none, Mr. Elides, I'll let you comment on any comments that were made.
I'd like to make a couple of comments if I can. First of all, I think we have to understand here that we're talking about a very serious safety situation. If you, for example, put a gate or a fence up on either side of this building, you could get somebody, a child, a person, an individual, who ends up inside this area and can't get out. The building commissioner made it very clear that he would never permit that kind of a situation to take place. Secondly, it's one thing to be accommodating, but the fact of the matter is, if you're familiar, and I don't know if any of you had a chance to get up to look at the area in question here, if you're familiar with the area, what in fact happens is, if the fence comes down and nothing else goes up there, number one, a terrible safety issue of anyone who can just go over the wall there, and number two, in fact, already they're using a good portion of my client's property where from the end of their property to where the fence is, and now they want to be able to basically have the free run of the property, the entire area there. We'd like to be accommodating, but when you look at all of the risks and all of the possibilities for problems here, and the building commissioner acknowledges that, it just makes no sense.
What about cutting down the trees on their land?
The trees, I don't know anything about. I know it was a subject that came up here at that time, at the hearing. It was already talked about that those trees came down, whatever they might have been. I'm not sure. I thought they were all on my client's land. I certainly don't think they took down anything on their land. Are you saying they took down? Well, I don't know about that. I mean,
Because, that raises to two levels. One is the civil action, and also it's a criminal level too.
They have
trees and land of another.
Yeah, they certainly have that right, Mr. Chairman, no question about that. But beyond that, to basically put themselves in a position of usurping my client's property rights away from him, I think at this point is unfair. And don't forget what I said. I mean, we're talking about an area that if somebody goes up to the edge here, the drop there is how many feet, Mr. Sullivan, would you say? I mean, it's at least 12, 15 feet, I would say, where somebody could fall because they were unprotected by what's there. It just doesn't make any sense.
Okay. What would be the estimated cost of putting the siding the length of the additional part of the back of the building?
I don't know, Mr. Chairman.
What would be the additional cost going from the berm back to the curb, the granite, as we approved instead of the asphalt berm?
I'm sure mathematically we could come up with that number, Mr. Chairman. I don't know exactly what it would be, but... Because,
I mean, usually I know for the siding, the siding is the same thing too. It's just figure out how big it is and what the cost factor is. I mean, so I know you have property rights that you're concerned about. Obviously, the neighbors are concerned about their property rights too, with regards to the trees being cut down. So, I mean, part of the thing I know on the fence, it's a little bit of each where, I mean, so we have three issues here. One of them is satisfied in regards to the rooftop. So then, number two, the existing fence will be moved at the expense of the commons and be connected to the back of the building. Then it goes on to the construction area. So that one's a little bit of each. Then the first one is the vinyl siding. So I'm just curious at all what compromise can be made between 1 and 2, where 2 is a combination of both parties, and 1 is just a vinyl fence, and the only question I'd have is what the cost of that vinyl fence would be, because what the distance is and what size is it.
I certainly would be willing to see if we could find out the cost of completing the siding, Mr. Chairman, if that would help the situation.
I'm just, I mean, you're talking concerns. I know when the property management did come back to us. They came back to us, I want to say, last spring sometime, indicated they concerns with some of the issues on site. Then we continued the matter to another hearing, and at that point in time, this agreement was given to us, saying that the people agreed to the issues, and therefore the board said, okay, we'll accept this and place it on file that there has been a compromise rendered. Now the compromise has not been rendered, so I guess it's our decision what conditions to make or impose.
Well,
What compromise can be reached.
I'm certainly willing, as I've indicated, to go back and talk to my client about this, bearing in mind again, Mr. Chairman, that in terms of the siding, we were doing this for a visual for these folks, and you can be back there, and they've covered the building, and I hate to get into this aspect of the thing as well, but this is a commercial, industrial, retail area that has some residential that got interposed into it. And I think we talked about that at the time of this thing. They certainly can't expect to have the forest and the suburban setting there, because when they bought the properties, that isn't what they had in the first instance.
Well, if we want to mention the forest, they could say you took the forest.
I'm sorry, Mr.
If you want to mention the forest, they're going to argue you took the forest.
Wow, we might have taken a tree or two down. I don't know what that is.
I don't know either what trees were taken or not.
Beyond that, and I would certainly even talk to my client about planting some trees if that would help their situation, although God knows how long that would take, I think, to give them any kind of screening that they're looking for. I guess I would ask, Mr. Chairman, if it's a question of completing the siding top to bottom, and I think you're asking me just top to bottom. You're not saying on the entire rest of the building up to the front of the street, are you?
No, I'm just asking what the compromise has been tried to, what was it suggested, what the price would be. I'm sure when your client indicated he'd be willing to do this, I imagine he took a cost factor into consideration. I think most people would.
I'm sure
before he said, I'm going to do this, put it in writing, sign it, submit it to the board, he did give it some serious consideration. That's all I can think of.
Well, I think my client understood that that what he was doing for their purposes was screening the back of the building. That party understood. I don't think he understood that he was going all the way up to the front, and I don't think he understood that he had to go all the way down to the bottom, because, as I indicated before, no one else sees it. In any event, certainly, Mr. Chairman, as you know, I would certainly be willing to make an effort in discussing with my client what we might be able to do to try and help that situation out. But I don't want to deal with the fence, I can tell you that. It just isn't fair. It isn't, not fair, it's a safety issue. I'm sure if the board asked the building commissioner to give them a greater explanation on the safety issues involved, he would. I wasn't able to get into all of that at this time, but there's some serious, well, not just safety, but as he alluded to, property right issues there as well.
Just so the neighbors know, what happened is we did receive a letter from Mr. Camacho, who's the building inspector for the city. He indicated about the fence, and here's a note here. It says, the fence helps to prevent access to the roof of the new building. Removing the fence may also allow the occupants of the condos to gain access to Mr. Ann's property and possibly use it in a way that may be inappropriate, such as a grill. If the condo association takes down the fence, there is nothing stopping NAM from installing another, because the fence may be owned by one party, but on the property of another is a matter for the property owner's attorney to address. Unless removing the fence with a specific condition of any permit granting authority, inspectional service does not have any further comment on the fence. So that's basically, I don't know if you've had a comment on that, but that's the comments addressed to us. At this point in time, I'll turn over to any of the board members. Have any questions? Mr. Fischett?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and clearly this is the challenge of when residential development takes place in this type of a zone, and we recognize that when we first looked at this proposal. And what we're trying to do is preserve the integrity and, quite frankly, for the benefit of the entire city, the value of the residential units as well as your client's property rights. And clearly it's a delicate balance, and, it's a good example of how you have conflicting uses at work here. Having said that, Attorney Leides, did you work with your client to negotiate these
I didn't.
conditions?
I didn't. I was not involved in it.
Okay. Because, the board didn't impose these. These were negotiated conditions that were brought to us, addressing basically our concern that the petitioner and the owners of the commons come to some sort of an agreement. And certainly it seemed like a reasonable compromise at the time. I appreciate the building commissioner's comments, but his interpretations of, if I tell you I'm going to side the back of the building, maybe, the way this is worded, these are how attorneys make a living, I suppose, because, it didn't say the entire back of the building. But clearly, when you read that, to me, it would infer the back of the building. And I must say, for myself, I would like an opportunity to take another look at the back of that site, having seen the building commissioner's comments, trying to understand. I understood it as the commons would pay for the removal of the fence, the fencing would be extended, the back of the building was basically going to be used as the fence. That's how I certainly understood that.
It would be worthwhile, Commissioner, because I was in the same position,
Sure.
to tell you the truth, at the time.
Sure.
When we were all together here. I had not truly investigated that situation.
Sure.
And I think if you get up there and see it, you'll see some of the problems that really I'm talking about there.
Yeah, for myself, at this point, I'd like to view it differently and look at it based on what we're discussing here, because it is a serious concern. But having said that, I certainly I would agree with the chairman's comments relative to the siding of the building, and I can appreciate the request because of the cost of the curbing, but that's what we approved, and certainly that would be costly if we didn't want to allow that waiver, and that's certainly we're well within the purview not to agree to that.
Sure.
And certainly, I would, at this point, barring any comments from fellow board members, I certainly would like to not vote on this evening to accept this, but to actually take another look at this site relative to the situation out there. That's my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Fischett. Mr. Claremont, any questions?
I concur with Mr. Fischett. What I'd like to do is perhaps have a site view with the board, if the board is available someday, to meet one with the applicant and the members of the condo association, so we can review exactly what the issues are. We've got an agreement that was drafted between under the letterhead of Riney Management Corp., and I believe that was incorporated into the approval process. So at one point, that's what was agreed upon. These people have reasonable expectation that that's what's going to be complied with. If there's some compelling reason why it shouldn't be, safety or otherwise, I think we have to know that, and we have to take a strong look at that. So I'd certainly be in favor of a continuance to the next meeting, perhaps a site view before that time. But I do have one question. We're here really for two reasons. One is the request for the minor plan changes as referenced on the letter dated November 25th, and second, the issues dealing with the residential property next door. But as I look at the letter dated November 25th, it's a request to approve 3 minor plan changes from the approved site development plan, one of which, the landscaped entrance island off Middlesex Street, has been constructed with vertical granite curbing with geometric shape being modified slightly from the approved plan. Secondly, the interior parking lot islands have been constructed in approved locations with the substitution of asphalt berm in lieu of approved vertical granite curb, essentially due to financial reasons. And then third, concrete curb has been installed along the concrete walkway. The approved plan called for vertical granite curb. Have these changes been done already, or are they a request to change on the plan?
They've been done.
What-
They're installed. When the city came out to issue a temporary occupancy permit, it was noted there were no islands in place, there were no tree plantings, there were a number of deficiencies that Mr. An addressed. They were constructed. He was able to obtain a temporary occupancy permit, but then we had to go through this process to request the minor changes, with the understanding that if they're not accepted, then corrective measures would have to be taken. But the items you have referenced are all in place.
Why wouldn't the request for the plan changes have come before the work was done?
I think it was really a matter of timing. I think I wasn't involved in this. I don't know too much, but I know Master An was looking for his temporary certificate. City officials were out there. Things were noted to be deficient, and in order to, he had tenants trying to get into those spaces, made the changes to get the sign off. And then you can see this was done back in November that we made the request, and now we're in February. So we did request them right away when they were done. And with the weather too. We were in November. They had to get in place. He was up against it for tree planting, seasonal requirements too, but I understand your question with that.
Okay. All right, I have no other questions at this point. As I said, I would recommend a site view with all the parties.
I mean, getting back to what Mr. Claremont said, I know if he has a concern, he could bring it before the board. I know we meet every 2 weeks, so if he had a time constraint, this is dated November 25th. I think we had a meeting within 7 to 10 days of this date. So I know if you're looking at comparison and getting estimates, one, if you're going to get the one in regards to what the vinyl siding may be, you might want to get an estimate to see that if we deny your request, and you have to go back and put the granite curb through the whole site, and if we wipe out the 3 conditions you request, what that change is going to cost you as well. So if you're getting approvals and estimates, you might as well get those estimates too.
Fine.
And you know, we did give you 3 specific conditions which you failed to comply with. And now you're coming in and asking for relief after the fact that you already did them.
If I, Mr. Chairman, if I may suggest, perhaps we should go over 2 meetings time-wise here, and maybe the weather will get a little better too, because I think it'd be rough kind of walking around in that area.
No problem. We
at this
can put it
time.
out further. I mean, that way we might be able to give you an idea of what financial constraints you're looking at one way or another. I mean, we just had a concern, another project that came up, and they did the work without our approval, so now we've been trying to cut down on that, buckle down on that, and then, Kate, you know, it gets back to the fact when people come in for variances, they go ahead, they don't ask for variance, they go ahead and build it, they get caught, and then they say, well, what should we do about it? Do we let them keep it up? And then one applicant said, well, the reason why I didn't ask for the variance is because we know we wouldn't get it, therefore we didn't come before you. So therefore, since now we shut down, we figure you're going to give it to us. But if we came to you at a proper time and you said no, then we were out of luck. Now it's already up. What are you going to do about it? So you're putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah,
so do you reward negative behavior and shoot down positive behavior? I mean, I'm not saying it was intentional or not, but you give a comment to the neighbors, your client indicating he's willing to work with this, then he comes in and says, I already did these 3, now I want relief. So talk about coming to the table with clean hands. I don't think your clients come to the table with clean hands. But that's only my opinion. So if you'd like, we can continue this into our March meeting. I'd be more than happy to communicate through Aaron, and we can do a site visit, and that way you can find out what it'll cost to approve the plans as requested, and maybe what it'll cost to do the vertical, and then basically what we could do, if need be, depending on the city department people, if Mr. Camacho could join us on this, so basically he can show what his concerns are, you hear what his concerns are, we hear what their concerns are. Obviously, if it's a safety issue, everybody wants it done right. I mean, obviously you do, you live there. I mean, if they feel the safe, if there's some compromise, and if the inspectional services see something that we don't, since they're out there every day making comments upon it, maybe, you know, he can express it to us and say, gee, board members, I know this is what they want, I know they're not willing to do it, but if we do it this way, it could be a safety issue to the children, or anybody in that neighborhood, and that's our primary goal here, is the safety and welfare of the neighborhood. So if he shows us what he's concerned with, I think obviously if you felt there's a safety issue, you'd be willing to listen to his concerns as well. And I think that's the big one on the safety issue. So, but if not, we could put it over to the beginning of March. We could communicate with Aaron and see what days are available. We'll also check with Mr. Jedman, who's, couldn't make it tonight, and see what works for our schedule, and maybe get together and see if Mr. Camacho can join us out there. And if you want to put it the first meeting in March, we could do so.
March 2nd is the first meeting, if that's...
I
I'll listen to
think
you in a
that's
minute,
enough
okay?
time.
Okay. Yes, ma'am, do you have a comment on that? Sure.
I just want to comment on two issues. I live in the corner unit so that I do see the rear of the entire building, and the condition was not to side to the end of our units. The condition was to side the entire rear, or the rear part of his building. His building goes to the street, and there's a good portion from the corner of my unit out to the street that I do see that is unsided. So it's just the cinder blocks that I get to look at. Secondly, I'm unaware of the safety issue or the 17 or 18-foot drop you're talking about. 7 or 8. Where is the drop? I don't understand that.
Jack, do you know where that is, Jack? Could you explain that? If you don't mind stepping up, I think Jack
Because
being the engineer,
to
he
my
might-
knowledge, Masteron had all of that area behind his building up to the level of our property filled in, so that there is no drop, unless I'm misunderstanding where you're talking about.
Do you mind? I don't mind. Okay, I'm gonna let Jack explain if he can, that way hopefully we can all understand where he's coming from.
I think the drop they're talking about is the top of the building. The building height's about 14 feet high, 12 to 14 feet high. The existing retaining wall was 4 or 5 feet high, and then there was a 6-foot-high fence on top of that. So from the top of the building, if you remove the fence to the top of where the retaining wall used to be, it would be like an 8 or 10-foot difference in height.
No, I mean, when you filled in, you covered the retaining wall. You
Correct.
actually have a foot fill above the retaining wall.
Correct.
And currently with the fence there, the fence gives, and this is a fair concern, somebody trying to get on the building, the fact that the fence is there gives them additional 6 feet to get to the top of the building. If you take the fence out, we take away that access. Our fence is not on the retaining wall.
I think the idea was if someone got on top of the building and then they went to, if it, a vertical drop from the top of the building to where the ground is now, would you say is about 8 to 10 feet?
Well, we're going to have a chance to review all that. Right now,
Okay.
it's abstract. We'll go out there, we'll
Right.
take a look
We're
at
going
it
back
between
and
now
forth.
and March 2nd. If the condo, a representative of the association could get in touch with Aaron and leave some contact information, we'll pick a date when everyone's available.
And then if you have any follow-up in regards to those, hopefully you can ask him, and then we'll know exactly what to look at when we go out, okay?
I'd
So,
just like to point out that
Okay.
since this is, the board will be there, it is a public meeting, so I'll need time to provide notice for at least a couple days before that on-site meeting. It is public and will be noticed.
so we'll entertain a motion
As
that the matter be continued to March 2nd.
So moved.
Second?
Favor say aye. Okay, the matter will be continued to March 2nd. Thank you. Good luck. Thank you for coming down tonight. Appreciate it. Thank you. Moving along, back to new business, we have the Hamilton Canal District. This is a form-based zoning code update. The planning board will hear from Mr. George Parekas, Director of Planning and Development at the Planning Board Development Division, with an update on the latest iteration of the form-based zoning code that would be proposed for the Hamilton Canal District. Thank you for coming, George. Always good to have you back in the room with us again.
I think either you or Aaron just gave me Adam's title, though, so...
I was trying to read it, so, but...
We're thinking ahead.
Don't tell Adam that. I think he's very happy there. Anyway, I appreciate your entertaining me here tonight to talk about the form-based code. In front of you, I have a copy of the latest version of both the zoning amendment and then starting on page, I believe it's 67, the subdivision amendment that together make up the form-based code. The presentation that I have is what was given at the Hamilton Canal Charrette meeting in January that was unfortunately scheduled at the same time as your meeting that night, so you weren't able to attend. It's sort of a brief update on where things are going, and I thought it was a reasonably good structure to kind of go through introducing this again. I wanted to give you a little bit of feedback on this today because at your next meeting on February 19th, along with anything else that may be going on, there are 3 items on the agenda regarding the Hamilton Canal District. The first is a recommendation to the council on the zoning amendment that is the first half of this packet. The second is a public hearing to amend the city subdivision standards by adding an appendix to the end of it, which is the second half of this packet. And the third is that the applicants, the Trinity Hamilton Canal Limited Partnership, the organization that is our selected master developer for Hamilton Canal District, will be presenting a preliminary subdivision plan to you as well, with hopes that if if the board sees to approve all of those things, they would be presenting a definitive subdivision plan to you in March, which would then allow them to proceed and go forward with the project from there. And actually a lot of the open space and the more detailed design review going forward from there will probably be something that we in the city government are going to be very closely participating in. Some of the state funds that came forward to provide some infrastructure assistance are going to help cover the costs of bringing this along the next step and help us with moving forward in preparation for doing the first phase of this project. So I know I've done some generic presentations on form-based codes before, and I've shown you some early drafts of this. So I can, if you'd like, I can kind of run through this quickly, and then I've sort of broken down some of the more specific sections that you might be interested in, and I can look to questions from you if there's specific things you'd like to know about, and then you can take this back and take a look at it between now and the February 19th meeting when it will be discussed again. There are about 10 pages between, actually 12, between page 100 and page 111 that are essentially blank in this document. They are the open space guideline, the open space standards that have the specific standards for each individual open space. We're sort of doing a staff review of that, and I hope to have them done in the next day or two. I will mail or email them to all of you as soon as I have them, and you can fill that piece into your document. The rest of this should be pretty much the finished document going forward from here. So as I've presented previously, one of the details about form-based codes is that while a lot of architects will tell you that form follows function, those of us who do city planning regulations like to say that form follows regulation, and that if you actually realize what you can do in terms of the form of a building, the first question an architect asks sometimes is not what do you want to do here, but what does the zoning say you can do here? So I'm going to go over a bit about how the code is documented and how it is administered and how it leads to how form follows regulation. One of the things I've done in previous presentations is ask, can we create a system that reflects community character and what the community wants, not just what they don't want? And I usually present that by using this quote from architect Christopher Alexander, who said that the challenge with some of these smart growth type codes and dealing with regulation that encourages sort of a vision for a viable mixed-use development where all the pieces work together is that when we may know what the appliance is, we need to find the plugs to connect it to the existing power grids. And the power grids he was referring to in a case like this is the appliance is the project itself, is all of the review process in the system that typically exists for the purpose of reviewing and approving development. And that what the form-based code essentially does is it creates that plug, it creates that connection to make sure that what gets into the development review process is actually what the vision is that people were looking for. So while a conventional zoning code, and if you imagine each of these blocks as the portion of the code that is done in a particular way, a conventional zoning code, half the code is use, maybe a third of the code is management, and what's left is a couple of setbacks and such things like that. Ours is a little bit more form-based because we have some of the maximum setbacks and we have some of the protections in site plan review. Use can be a little bit smaller. Management is still a key part, but the form piece becomes a larger portion of the code. And the general strategy is really in the last bullet, that the upfront public participation during creating the code and all of the process of sort of going through this code review process limits the need for doing individual project review if the master plan itself is entitled in the code process in more detail. So while you see these sort of tools of traditional zoning, setbacks, parking requirements, densities, and design guidelines, the tools of the form-based code, even the wording and the concepts of them are a little bit different. What the Form-Based Codes Institute says is it's something that actually is a code that is designed so that hopefully even the general public who don't spend all their days working in the planning world can actually understand. The public can see what happens where. It reflects the diversity of architecture within the community. It defines a neighborhood. It has a concise, organized, and well-written section for non-planners to understand. It reduces the need for design guidelines because it's really built into the code as an actual regulation. And project-by-project oversight becomes less important as you still have the oversight of the entire code, which is what essentially makes it important at this point to focus some energy on making sure we have the code right. Just to review, this is the table of contents of the zoning section. You can ask me later what happened to 10.3.6 and 10.3.9. As we rewrote sections, we pulled them out, and it was easier to not renumber them all. But essentially what it is it's kind of a simple setup. It has an application process, administrative process. 10.3.7 is the regulating plan, which is essentially the zoning map as well as the key to building form standards, which show what buildings go where. Use regulations, which are in broad categories. Functional design standards, which really serve to be the kind of review that typically could occur in a site plan review, sort of codified into the document. And then some other applicable regulations, some sections of the underlying zoning that still apply and pieces like that. Subdivision regulations include regulations for both streets and for open space, as well as typical application process for traditional subdivisions, preliminary and definitive review, and some technical engineering standards, as well as a list of things that the city engineer can work with the city and the developer to review after a subdivision is approved to settle. So kind of the bones of a form-based code is a regulating plan. Sometimes it's shown on one document, but usually if you show it on one document, it's incredibly unclear and difficult to read. So ours is on 3 sheets. One is in the zoning. I believe it's about page 22 of the zoning. It's this document up here, and what it shows is it serves as 2 things. It serves as the zoning map for the district with these zones A through G. And it also serves as the key to the building form standards, which tell you what can occur on individual lots. The second is a street standards regulating plan, which is in the subdivision section. I believe this is somewhere around page 77, 77. And that document basically shows which street types are required where. So unlike typical subdivision requirement, which might say you have a 28-foot wide street, this document would say, street C might be a certain width, street D might be a certain other width, based upon what types it is on the key on the right-hand side. And that depends upon kind of how that space works, and it spells out. Typically, there's a sidewalk, a treeway, and we'll go through that in a future slide. And then the third is a regulating plan for open space standards, which is a little further along in the document, page 98, which identifies specific open spaces, which are then described in those documents that we haven't yet included in the document, but are forthcoming. The key is every inch of ground within the boundary of the district is regulated by at least one of these plans, so that you can find out where it's regulated, what key it's under, and you can go to that page and you can figure out what you can do there. Typically then, each building lot on the code is connected to a building form standard, and that's a 2-page standard that looks like this, which is in the, if you go around page 53, 54, 55. They go through kind of each building lot. This is the one for the parking garage site, lot 14, which is incredibly complicated because there was a arrangement with the owners at Canal Place 3 to ensure they were comfortable with the design of the parking garage. It includes the possibility of having, the requirement actually of having a green wall along the side where it sort of drops off so that people looking out their windows are looking at sort of this lush green landscape rather than a lot of parking. And that was part of the arrangement that was set up there to make that all work right. Uses are all in 6 categories, and everything either falls into one of these 6 categories or it's not allowed. There are very few uses that are zoning board special permits, things like the telecommunication stuff that typically is a zoning board special permit. The vast majority of it either is allowed in one of these 6 categories or is not. And then there's a chart that basically says within the 7 districts which uses are allowed. And then they're keyed by level. So like, for example, some of the lots will allow retail at the street level but won't allow street retail at the upper levels. Or some will say that you can have parking at the, parking at a lower level or canal level, but you can't have parking right at the street level. So that it regulates kind of how that experience is as you're along the streets. Functional design standards, which if you'd like, I can spend a few more minutes on later, but essentially, as I said before, cover everything from utility equipment to trash handling to snow removal. There's requirements for recycling storage. There's establishments of how parking areas interact with the street. There's ground floor treatment requirements. There's security requirements. There's a requirement that snow that can't be stored needs to be trucked off site. There's deals with kind of how much window must be there, how mechanical penthouses are screened. All of those are in those standards. So then just to give you an idea of how the subdivision side works, this is a typical street standard. This is the most typical of the bunch, actually, street type 2A. 2 11-foot wide lanes, an 8-foot parking lane on each side, a 5-foot treeway, which is basically kind of a brick paved area with trees and lampposts and anything that's called street furniture. Somebody wants to put benches or anything else in there, they go in the treeway area. And then a clear sidewalk that in this one, I believe is 7 feet. So that's the essential kind of, every other street type is essentially built as a sort of subset of this, sort of changing the dynamic a little bit. Where it goes over bridges, the parking lanes drop off. In areas where the trolley may run, there's basically a 14-foot wide reserved trolleyway area on those streets that replaces one of the parking lanes. So this is typically how that would look. You still have a sidewalk. You don't have a treeway on the trolley side. It uses the right-of-way as best possible. Open space standards, which I don't have in today's package, will look something like this. They have a sort of a set of requirements and a set of guidelines. The requirements use the word shall and describe exact things that need to happen. The guidelines are a little bit more prescriptive of the kind of design we're looking for. And then the administration, basically the code is designed to reflect the master plan, the process that's gone on. There would not be a typical site plan or special permit review, although I'll reserve the not be a special permit review because there are a few cases where they are. Entitlement of the master plan creates a sense of development certainty for the public and the development team. They know what they're going to get, what happens. Review of individual projects is limited to a review of something referred to as consistency, which is basically a staff level review to ensure that the project is consistent with the zoning. That's it. There's something called a development proposal, which is basically the applicant's proposal for a development. And when they come in with a fully completed development proposal, essentially a building permit application, they need to receive something called a certificate of consistency, which would be a review process that's reviewed by a 3-person committee, which is basically the building commissioner, and the other 2 are described as the individual who oversees development of zoning for the city and the individual who oversees the urban renewal plans for the city, which essentially is, at this point, would be my position and James Erickson's position. So the 3 of us can create this group called the Hamilton Canal District Review Group. And within the 30-day window that a building permit is typically applied for and required to be issued, the review group would essentially do the zoning analysis for the project. And what we're really looking for is a strict standard of consistency. It's not a conditional sort of review. It's, you know, does this setback meet this requirement? Does that setback meet that requirement? You know, it says that this has to be screened. Can we see that screening? Is that screening in the building permit plan? And we have to be able to check through all of that, and if we can't, we have to ask for more information, and to be able to issue this definitive certificate of consistency, which gives the building commissioner then comfort level that he can issue a building permit that's consistent with zoning. They do have the opportunity to receive a preliminary one beforehand. This is something the developer actually asked for, to be able to come in with a preliminary set of plans that addresses all the zoning consistency issues but isn't a full building permit set. That allows them to be able to receive some assurances of zoning consistency in order to be able to receive financing, but they still have to come in with the full plan set for the definitive at the point in time they do the building permit. And then there's also an opportunity to do something we refer to as an updated certificate of consistency. This is for the cases where they get halfway through development and they decide they want to change something, and the theory is they will have to come back and get that certificate updated to establish that that change is still consistent with the zoning. You know, if they take a couple of windows out, since there's rules about percentage of the building that has to be window, we want them to prove back to us that they are not violating that zoning condition by removing those windows from the plan. Something like those sort of cases, just to ensure that that process is going. And the idea would be that they would apply for that before they actually made any changes. There's two sort of escape valves from the zoning. One is the special permit. This is a planning board review. These are the cases where you would be seeing a project. If the applicant comes to the conclusion that they cannot be strictly consistent with the zoning due to what we refer to as unforeseen circumstances or new technologies or something that has occurred since the master plan was written, but that the project is still consistent with the goals of the master plan. Essentially, they have to establish that they aren't going off the reservation from what they promised to the public. And the provision for that review is in here. Let's see, it is on page 19 actually. The planning board shall only grant the special permit upon written determination that, first of all, the criteria above have been satisfied, the specific manner to which that has been done. That essentially that criteria, which is in letter B up above, is that they can prove that there are unforeseen circumstances. The second is that they meet the general special permit criteria that's in the regular section of the zoning, the typical, good for public health and welfare and all of those sort of things. The third is that it's consistent with the master plan. The fourth is that it's consistent with the intent of the district, which are basically it's this 10-point bullet list item that was in the original request for proposals when we started the process on Hamilton Canal District. Those are the things about creating a walkable extension of downtown, ensuring that we connect better to the commuter rail station, improving the safety of the district, improving the tax base created from this land. So you'd have to make sure that there's a reason that they're establishing that is consistent with that underlying idea. It's a very typical special permit process. Other than that, you would receive your comment letter from planning would actually come from the review group. So the review group would get the opportunity to comment to the planning board on that. But the process is very similar. And then as all zoning other than use variances require in the state, there is a variance provision to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance if they see fit. Although it's very interesting the way the special permit standards are set up, that essentially it may often be, if they are consistent with the master plan, the special permit process may be easier for them. If they are inconsistent with the master plan, it would be interesting to see how one meets the variance standard. But that option is available to them should they see fit to need a variance. And that also asks for the review group to make a comment to the Zoning Board of Appeals in the case where they do that. And as usual, you would see that, so you would get to make a comment to the Zoning Board of Appeals as well. This is our, as I explained this in the charrette meeting, this is our best case scenario approval process. If either you or the council sees fit to dig deeper into this, obviously, that is certainly your right to do so, and continuances would adjust the schedule. But if it works on the most efficient schedule possible, The zoning side was in the council packets the 23rd of January. It was referred to you the 27th. It has been scheduled for public hearing the 19th. Next Monday, I'm taking this presentation to the Historic Board. We are requesting the Historic Board add a sort of two-sentence, it's 2 or 3 sentence provision to their standards, which basically allow them to adopt the code and establish that the code would apply as if part of their standards were consistent, and then where the code is silent on things like architectural review, the standards would still apply, and the Historic Board would be able to sort of add that architectural review on top of the provisions of the code. So we're going to go through that whole discussion with the Historic Board. I'm working with Steve Stoll from Historic to write what that change will actually look like. Something we presented earlier as a general idea, but we have also been over this document 1,000 times with the National Park Service staff. And one of the things that has led us to be a little behind our original schedule on this is that parcels 2 and 4 were a very significant discussion and negotiation with National Park Service about how they would look and how they would work. They came to conclusions on what they were comfortable with. The developer agreed to that, and then we entitled that structure and those height requirements into the code so that it was something that everybody's okay with and is built right into the code as the requirement for that lot. If you see fit to recommend out the zoning on the 19th, the council would have the opportunity to be able to vote on it as early as the 24th. And if you see fit to approve the preliminary subdivision on the 19th, the applicant would have the opportunity to have the definitive to you as early as the 2nd of March if they're they did submit their application paperwork today. We haven't looked it over. We have to see if it's consistent with what would potentially be the proposed subdivision regulations. So these are essentially the sections that may be of particular interest in terms of the way the code works. The building form standards, the use table, the functional design standards, and then the subdivision sections on process, streets, technical requirements. And then we have a section on low impact design on page 117. And what that essentially does is it allows the applicant to waive some of the street standards without having to come back through subdivision review if they decide to do so for the purpose of creating a low impact design intervention. So for example, the treeway is supposed to be brick, but if they wanted to create a situation where there was some sort of swale within the treeway that collected rainwater, and the city engineer and public works department agreed to allow that, they could waive from the street standard in order to do that if they see fit. I don't know if they will see fit. That's honestly, that's something that we and the city engineer were very interested in. The applicant is looking into whether or not, the developer's looking into whether or not that works. But it's something that we wanted to allow the option and the opportunity to do. There are 2 good green stories about this project. I mean, the first is that the applicant is seeking the application for the LEED ND, which is the LEED Neighborhood Design Standard for green certification for the entire project. And the second is that they have indicated they want to do green roofs on at least 30% of the rooftops in the development, and they have committed to that, and they have committed to have that to the level that we have actually written it into the subdivision standards as a requirement, and they have been perfectly okay with that. So if you have specific questions at this point, I'm open to whatever you may want to take a look at.
Ask you, on that 30%, what if some foreseeable circumstances came before they couldn't meet the 30%? They'd have to come before you, as the board, then come before us if you didn't grant it to them?
Yeah, each item,
if
like...
something came
right.
down, they couldn't afford it, financial reasons, something happens, and they're falling short of the 30%.
And anything like that requires a change from the subdivision standards would require a return to the planning board to request a waiver that they previously didn't have from the standards.
Would that meet with yourself again and that board permitting authority first, or just come right to us first?
My
You said it'd be a 3-member board. Would it go through that process first, or just come right to us?
My understanding is that a waiver of subdivision standards would come directly to you. I mean, I think our group would comment, provide you input on it, but it is the planning board's purview to waive subdivision standards.
Most likely there'd be some review from your committee.
Yeah, I mean, we would take a look
either through
at...
planning and development that you pass on to Aaron, or through the committee that the 3 years sit on.
Right. It would be pretty typical like that. You know, my expectation is I'm hoping that since the developer has been very much interested in participating in the review process to date, that they're not going to seek a subdivision waiver from anything when they first apply for subdivision, since you know, they've been providing comments, feedback on the subdivision standards themselves. I'd be surprised if they do, but certainly if in the future they see fit to need a waiver. Now, the way the technical requirements are set up, there are a series of things in the requirements that are required. If you start on page 115 and you sort of look, 114, and you look at the requirements for utilities, for drainage, for sewer and water, and you know, each 500 feet has to have a fire hydrant. All water mains shall be at least 8 inches in diameter. Those are pretty standard things. Then if you go on to page 116, there is a bulleted item list of things that they don't actually need planning board waivers for. Those are the items that they can negotiate with the city engineer to address. And they're things like kind of how the crosswalk base course material is, post-construction cleanup, where the granite bounds are installed. They're little things that kind of we thought made more sense to work through later, particularly since what they're presenting is a definitive subdivision plan that is pretty far along, but for which is going to be, it's going to be finalized in a process where actually the engineering firm doing that final work is probably, looks like it's going to be a contractor for the city, so it's going to be something they're working hand in hand with us on through this state infrastructure grant.
Now, if an applicant applies, say, for a certificate of consistency, do you seek department review? Is the fire department involved, engineering office, or is it just, here's the standards, if you comply with these standards, you're good?
At the time they're applying for a certificate of consistency, they're also applying for a building permit. So typically, the reviews that would occur are the ones that the building department usually requests at sign-off at a time of building permit. That includes fire department, it includes engineering. I am not sure which other departments do. I do believe that you'll see most of the departments that regularly comment to you are in that loop, because they'll need a permit for water service, so they'll be at the water department. They'll need a permit for their sewer connection, so they'll be at wastewater. So you'll see typically that sort of review coming in, but the key to the major items, the major questions to be settled, is that every one of those departments has reviewed this document as a whole to date to make sure that if there is an important provision, like for example, wastewater had some very specific stuff they wanted in here about how the sewer pump station that's likely to be on the site is going to look. There's specific wording in it that says that the wastewater department retains control of what equipment goes in the pump station. They have specific equipment in every other pump station in the city. They want the same equipment in the Hamilton Canal pump station so that if something breaks, the replacement parts are interchangeable. So they made sure that that's in the subdivision standard so that those issues are settled up front. I expect, though, that when that equipment goes to be built, they will be a part of looking in more detail into making sure that particular standard is met. As far as an individual building, though, yeah, it's likely to go through the reviews that a by right building review would go through, or any other building permit.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just first a comment, and I have to say, I represent the planning board at the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, and as a counselor, and the work that George has done on this has come up, and I believe NEMCOG is going to utilize some of George's knowledge, but it's pretty much understood out there that Mr. Proakis has become one of the premier form-based zoning people in the state, so I think that's worthy of notation. Having said that, I have more of a technical question, and I'm learning there's new terminology and a new world of alphabet soup introduced to all of this. But as I was looking at the material that we had in our package, the build-to-line and the street wall percentage, if I'm looking at this document, Judge, if you could, and I can certainly talk to you at another time, but I'm just trying to, as I'm looking at this and I'm trying to apply it to individual sites, how would I, if I, just take page 26, standards for parcel 1, I'm just trying to relate that build-to-line standard that you have, and then the street wall, and I'm just trying to understand how, if I'm
Yeah.
looking at that, how I'm going to relate those.
Sure. That is, it is somewhat confusing, and the challenge is that the answer to those questions are essentially in the definitions, but I think sometimes you have to read those definitions 4 times before you really
Yeah,
get
I was
to the
going to
point
say,
where you know
I
the
have
answer.
to admit, I've read the definition several times, and that's why I'm asking for some clarification.
And one of the most significant improvements, I should add, to this code since the last draft is that we are working with this legal counsel from Robinson and Cole that has offices in Boston and Hartford, and they have written a number of these in other states. They have been incredibly helpful with the definition section of the document. They have saved me, essentially, in getting clearer definitions than were in earlier drafts. I think that they really were a valuable assistance to making that as best as it can be in something that can be as confusing as this particular part. So, I mean, to step through, if you look at parcel 1, starting on page 26, I think that's probably one of the most straightforward ones. If you look at parcel 7, you can get a lot more complicated. But parcel 1 is sort of a basic way of looking at this. The strategy for parcel 1 is that what we really want to make sure is we want to make sure that the building that's built here comes out to each the northeast, south, and west line for at least some portion of it, so that there's some wall along the sidewalk on each side. Yet at the same time, like all of the parcels in the district, the developer's been given the flexibility to shift between being a commercial and a residential project. Most likely, we see this as a commercial site because it's across from the courthouse, and there's some minimum residential and commercial in the land disposition agreement that they've done with the city. But should a commercial developer come along and say they want to be on building 9, the developer then turns around and decides they want residential on parcel 1 instead, the parcel has to be flexible enough to allow for that change. And the biggest challenge with a commercial building is you can build it out to the lot lines pretty easily. Residential building, typically, if it's wider than 60 feet at any point, gets complicated because you need to have a corridor with apartments or condos on both sides. There's a certain distance from windows that things can be. And at that point, the typical double-loaded corridor of a unit on each side of a corridor, if you go beyond 60 feet, you end up with units deeper than 25 feet, and then you end up with spaces in those units that don't have natural light. So all of that leads to why these are the way they are. If you look at each side of the building, northeast, southwest, you'll see build-to lines that say for north between 5 and 9 feet. So you have to go at least 5 feet off the property line, but you can't go more than 9. So it's a minimum and maximum. You can build the wall anywhere between those 2 lines. East is 0 to 4 and west is 0 to 4. The south line steps a little further back to try to get you further in line with kind of where the courthouse parcel is and where it has to do with kind of where Middlesex Street lines up. But so it's between 7 and 20. And if you actually try to make the building square, it sort of starts at 7 at the east side and backs off closer to 15 as you get to the west side. So that gives you some flexibility there. Now, the catch is you don't have to build the entire stretch on the street wall line. You can build less than that. What the next line is, street wall percentage, is the percentage of that frontage that needs to be on the build-to line. So on the north side, between 5 and 9 feet, you must have 55% of that north side with a wall between 5 and 9 feet back. And furthermore, the height range that's after that says that that wall must be between 55 and 85 feet high. So you can't build just a one-story wall there. It has to be something that's sort of an urban kind of downtown type of block over that stretch. Now, the reason why the other numbers drop off a little bit, and then what happens is the last 2 columns are a little more tricky. They say if you're going to build a building along the rest of that street wall, and if you're not going to build a building, they don't apply. But if you are, you can't go more than a certain distance back. So while 55% of the north wall has to be between 5 and 9 feet, the other 45% can go back as far as 50, or maybe, the building slices off and there's no wall there at all. What that lets you do is that lets you build a couple of different types of buildings on this lot. It lets you build the square fully out, but it also lets you build a U-shaped building with a courtyard in the middle, where maybe on the west side only the 2 ends touch, and the middle is 50 feet further back. And what that would create is a more residential corridor, double-loaded 60-foot wide corridor with a center courtyard that would be more logical for that. This particular lot also lets you build 2 smaller buildings with the center open so that you can kind of walk through the middle in between it. Any of those is doable within the build-to line requirements. What is not possible is to shove a building all the way onto one corner of the lot and leave the rest of it as basically wide open space, and then lose the urban character of a building up to the street on any given street. Typically, I think there are three things that building form standards here do well to establish the urban character. The first is that they have build-to lines on multiple sides to ensure that your building has to touch multiple sides. The second is it has a height range to ensure that the buildings are going to be of an urban character of height where they are along the street. And the third is the parcel coverage requirement, which establishes that when you do go to build there, at least 55%, but no more than 90% of the lot has to be filled with building, so that you get some bulk of development there. I mean, our concern is that, you know, we're trying to create an extension of downtown. You know, the character of a suburban office park is very nice for a suburban office park. It's just not what is in the master plan. In order to sort of move away from that towards a more urban character, all of those pieces kind of come together to do that. And that's essentially how the build-to-line, street wall, height range, maximum setback piece works on each of these.
That's perfect. I wish I had called you up over the weekend, but maybe it's because I read it so many times it sunk in very easily the way you said that. But
yep.
That's perfect. It gives me an idea of how we use these, the site configuration as we look at the document and understand what you're trying to accomplish here. So,
yeah, one of the things we've done is we sort of walked through each one and tried to kind of draw the different shapes you can do on the lot with each one to find out. You know, one of the nice challenges of this is always to try to find the worst thing you can do with each one of these and see how bad it actually is, because that's the thing you worry about most. So different ones have different options. Like Site 5 has larger minimum street wall percentages on the south and west side, because we decided that if they were going to do a residential building on Site 5, you'd have to notch out a corner of the building to get that 60-foot double-loaded corridor, and we'd rather have them notch the northeast corner than the southwest corner, so we held a higher percentage on those other two sides. I mean, that's kind of been the strategy of how we've thought through each of these pieces.
There's one thing, Mr. Chairman, that does address, when I think of so many zoning changes that have taken place over the years, when you think of the conventional zoning, with the intent of a particular project being developed, and we've involved in this even with the master plan process and the rezoning, and you really have one intention in mind, but it's broad, and there are different things that can happen, and many times what is envisioned when the zoning is created, it doesn't really come out that way based on what comes before you. But I think the beauty of this is it really drives the development to get the specific development you want, which is which is key in the success of the site, I believe.
But what type of input are you looking from the historic board on this? Can you just go through that quickly?
The strategy for the historic board, if they're comfortable with the whole process, if they're comfortable with the document at this point, certainly we've worked closely with their staff and the National Park Service staff to make them comfortable with the document. The general strategy would be that we're looking for essentially an endorsement, an acceptance of the idea that within the district, endorsing the ideas of what's in the code works as forming a good base for how they apply the historic board standards to the particular site. And in the particular situation actually is that by adding something into the standards addressing that endorsement, it would address the idea that where the code stipulates something that is either unclear or inconsistent in the historic board standards, that what's in the code would be something the historic board would be saying they're comfortable with and would apply in that case. There is one very specific area where the historic board standards are inconsistent with the code. It's the height of the building on parcel number 4, and the historic board standards have some very specific wording on new construction and major projects in building height. The National Park Service staff and the developer have worked to become very comfortable with the idea of what it will be on parcel 4 and how it will work. And what we would not like to do is have the developer go 7 years down the road and then decide they want to develop parcel 4, come to the historic board and have the historic board say, well, you can't do that, it's inconsistent with our standards. The solution to that is if the historic board agrees with the National Park Service that has been comfortable with this and they agree to endorse the code and incorporate it. And the way I look at it, if you actually read the historic board standards today, the historic board standards incorporate the Lowell sign book, for example, and it says the sign book is incorporated herein by reference. So what we're asking for is essentially the similar language,
Just a reference,
that the
different
code would be incorporated into the historic board standards by reference as the controlling document in the Hamilton Canal District, with the understanding that the type of architectural design review historic board does would still apply on each of these lots.
So
Yeah.
any architectural standards would just be referenced and not repeated?
Right, well, because this does not get into detailed architecture, like actual
Not even
design and style are not in this code book. Some form-based codes do that, but we decided not to because it's all in the historic board's district, and the historic board has a pretty good record of doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, so the theory would be each of these projects would go to the historic board and they would do the typical architectural design review that they do. I think the staff is already looking at the Appleton Mills rehab, which will be the first project they're likely to do.
Okay, thanks.
Any of the board members have any further questions? No? So you look like you're on schedule for everything then, right?
I hope so. If you have any questions between now and the 19th, feel free to give me a call or an email about it.
So we have 3 matters before us on the 19th that require a vote, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
right.
I think you had it back on that last screen there, okay.
Yeah, it would be the recommendation on the zoning to the council, which would be forwarded to the council for the
regular
review of
zoning
24th.
change, yeah.
The changes to the subdivision standards to essentially add this as an appendix to the subdivision standards. Aaron and I have been working for a while on doing new subdivision standards citywide. If we did that, we would just attach this appendix from the old document onto the new document. But for now, we're just attaching it to the old subdivision standards. It'll be what applies within the district. And then preliminary subdivision review is not a public hearing, but it does require a planning board vote to endorse or not endorse the preliminary subdivision before definitive is applied for. And in a commercial or mixed-use district, a development is required by state law to do both preliminary and definitive. Well, residential projects typically can skip preliminary if they want to. So this project has to do a preliminary, so that's why they're here.
So who will be giving us that presentation that evening?
On the preliminary?
Well, on all of it, I guess.
I will be here to answer questions and address anything on the zoning and the subdivision hearing.
Okay.
I expect that the developer will have their representatives here for the subdivision plan itself.
So would that be something we'll take into consideration all at once, or do you think we break it down into individual? I mean, or is it, which way would be easier to proceed?
That's a good
I
question.
mean, you want to throw the whole butts and everything else at once, so be it, and then we can, I know we'll need different motions for different matters, like the zoning recommendation and the subdivision.
It may be easiest to take the zoning and subdivision together, since
Right.
they're such a piece, but do the preliminary subdivision review after if you approve the standards, because you really can't open the subdivision review until you have the standards in place it's working under, so maybe that comes separately and after the first 2 pieces, which can sort of work together.
So do this zoning part first?
The zoning and the subdivision standards
Together.
pieces together,
Okay.
and then the actual preliminary subdivision
Review afterwards,
review afterwards and separately.
So the applicant would be on the first part, and you'd be on the second part, if need be, for any questions or concerns.
We'll all be here, yeah. Being that this has been sort of a process that we've been working with the applicant on to do the zoning and subdivision, I probably will provide the background on that. But the applicant has, their engineers have created the subdivision document. I'm not, no.
And if we have any questions between now and then, we can contact you or through Aaron either way to...
Either way,
Okay.
yeah, that'll be fine. And Aaron will be sending those subdivision documents around to city departments in the near future, so you'll also get the typical city department comments back on the subdivision documents as well.
So I know, so regardless of whatever our recommendation is on the zoning, it goes for the council for the zoning hearing the following week, right? Okay.
Yeah, you have to make a recommendation in order for the
either way,
council to be able to take it up.
Right.
I mean, the only circumstance under which they wouldn't is if you continue.
Right. I think we have enough information to go forward. Sounds like you're working hard enough to have us come in and intervene and say, what do you mean you don't know enough? I told you to ask me any questions in the interim. We wouldn't want to try to slow down your pace,
Well,
It looks like you're so far, you're on your third leg. For us to stop you now would be kind of tough.
We are not the most critical path item here, but we're pretty close. In order that they want to start construction on the Appleton Mills in May.
Yeah.
The other big thing that is drawing our schedule and we're working very busily on is kind of how to get some of the engineering work in place to be able to do the infrastructure work necessary to do that.
I think a lot of this question and answer period with us now is hopefully to make things sail a little easier on the 19th, right?
Yep.
So anything that came up, we could deal with and get the answers back to us on a timely manner.
Right. I mean, the reason I wanted to give you the document and be here today is to make sure that you have a chance to look at it. I didn't want to spring 117 pages of document on you on the 19th.
And then ask for continuance to digest
what
it.
do you need? Yeah. So I wish I wanted to actually give this to you 5 days ago, but as usual, it's been a challenge to keep these all together. And I will, as soon as I have the open space pages, we'll forward them along to you. Hopefully tomorrow, the latest on Thursday.
Okay. Any further comments? No? Well, we thank you for your update. And, we'll be in touch if anything comes up, and if not, we'll look forward to see you on the 19th.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your time coming in the site.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe will get another whack at this one. I mean, Rich will get another whack at the historic board.
Next week, yeah.
So he gets to go through it again?
Well, Steve will have that all,
So if he has any comments, he can see you next week before it comes back, right? Now, you must have had some communication with the historic board already, right?
We presented once to the historic board. It was quite a few months ago, just sort of an introduction to the concept, and then what we've been doing in the meantime is quite a number of meetings with National Park Service staff.
Yeah, because a lot of that falls right down to historic, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, so it's been.
That's a big part of your jurisdiction right there.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a big piece, and we're we're hoping that this is the right balance to kind of ensure the architectural and all the other pieces come together. So we'll be working with that. I think Steve already put the public hearing notice for the standards change into the paper, so that should be on the agenda.
Oh, was it?
That you see for next week.
So that's not for next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
All of the members of the historic board will get a copy of this in the next day or two as well. So.
Give them a chance to digest it, huh?
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks again. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Moving along on the agenda, we have notices from abutting towns. Place those on file if there's no objection. And moving along to the Zoning Board of Appeal notices. These are matters that can appear before the Zoning Board of Appeals for a public hearing on February 9th, 2009 at 6:30 p.m. here in the City Council chambers. The first matter is a special permit for telecommunications. The applicant is Bell Atlantic Mobile of Massachusetts Corporation, doing business as Verizon Wireless, and the representative is Earl W. Duval, Esquire, and this location is at 141 Marginal Street, also known as 106 Marginal Street, and this is institutional zone. This is for the installation of telecommunications antennas on an existing smokestack in an adjacent equipment shelter according to section 7.6 of the zoning code. if you look at the plan, there's, on the smokestack, there already is existing antennas on that smokestack. And what they're gonna do is just put them down lower. And it looks like, as indicated, this does have to go before the zoning board of appeals. And they did a good job of mentioning all the requirements and what they do have in place. I also mentioned that, I know when they come for the site plan, we require a deposit or a bond of some sort. And that will to state that they're willing to come in the mutually financial solution anyway to the zoning board of appeals for an surety or passport account or letter of credit. But basically, I think it's already on. I mean, the smokestack already has the antennas there now, and the ones they're gonna put in are lower than the ones that are already there. You can see that they're not going any higher, so they're lower down. Oh, you're the color pictures, you look out.
They're down here.
Get the color
This was
one.
hand-delivered, that's what.
Oh, okay.
One of my emails.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, down here.
Yeah, they're going lower down.
But
right.
they were like 10 or 12 feet high or something.
Yeah. See, but the other ones are way up top, these are gonna be
Yeah.
lower down,
Yeah.
yeah. I have it here, I don't have the color one yet. I don't have any problem with it myself, I don't know what the other boards.
My only question was, you know, I know in at least one other case, the site itself may be kind of messed up.
Yeah, I think they're
And
gonna,
that, it's right on the upper right corner, or the northwest corner of
Yeah, I
the
think-
property where the building's going up.
yeah, on the left side.
Do we require any cleanup of landscaping around that building?
I think that's subject to the zoning board of appeals. Appeals, you know, they're gonna put in the new proposed building to that, that's to the
Yeah.
left, that would clean that up. You know,
If I
that's
can
gonna
make
This
it,
is existing, but.
Right.
if I can make
I didn't
a
see any reference to it. I know
comment
they got
on
that.
this, the applicant is leasing space from the developer, Brassi Development, who's doing the residential project here. And we pointed out to Brassi Development that there's a new building, there's a new construction for the utilities, the additional utilities needed to support the additional wireless mechanisms that go on the tower structure. And they actually were not aware of some of the changes on here. So I think the applicant of this project is gonna have to work with Brassi Development and actually where they locate it, because the proposed location of the new building actually is located on the path, the emergency pathway that goes around the back side of the building.
Okay.
So they need to touch base and work out where that's gonna go. I think Brassi Development wants to work with them to make sure it works, but it's just the actual location of that. As you look at the site plan review, I think it's the next meeting they were gonna come out, or the second, I can't remember, or in the special permit, with Brassi, it might be worth going over exactly what the outcome of that was.
Okay.
Yeah, that would make
Perhaps recommend
So bring
having-
that up next time when we have the
At that time.
site plan, the special permit
Yeah,
for
and
the
it may
marginal
be-
street coming before us.
And it may be worth recommending that the ZBA continue their review of this until
Till it-
you've had the
until
opportunity
our
to
site
review
plan
the
is-
site plan,
Okay.
to make sure that it jives.
Okay, so since it's on the site plan that's coming before us next meeting, maybe we should consider both of these at the same time?
Yeah.
But any board members have any comments on that? That appears to be a,
No, that makes sense.
okay.
I'll make a motion that we postpone it until that point.
Okay, motion made that we continue this to the next meeting so we can entertain this as when we do the site plan and special permit that's coming before us on February 19th, I believe.
With the additional recommendation that the ZBA also continue it to give us an opportunity to hear what their site plan is.
That's accepted into the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Motion's made, and I believe it was seconded by Mr. Clemmer?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. So this matter to continue. Okay. Moving along, the next matter is Gloria Yates and Timothy Lawler. This is on 84 Midland Street. And this is in a traditional two-family zone to construct an addition with insufficient front yard setback on an undersized lot according to Article 5, Section 5.1 of the zoning code. This is basically on a corner lot, and he's within, what, a foot and a half of the property line? It's on the corner of Midland and Lipton Street. So when he goes out to Lipton Street, he needs a minimum of 10, and he has, if he posts his addition on, he has only 1.5 feet. The only thing he had here was, please see attached reasons for proposal. I didn't get that in my comments, I don't know if anybody else did.
Well, there was a doctor's letter in there.
Oh, I didn't see that in my comments, so.
Oh, the last road condition. This was the one.
I mean, the fact that he's 1 foot from the property line, I mean, from the corner line.
He's got some letters apparently from some abutters that, you know,
Yeah.
agree with it. Oh, I'm not certain if that's the direct abutter
Yeah, because,
would be most impacted.
see, where he's coming out, the property, it goes to the street. You know, he's gonna come within 1.5 feet of the street, so it's not really in a direct abutter per se, like the property line, you know, it goes to Lipton Street, so.
1.5 is pretty difficult, though. That's-
Yeah, I know,
I
that's
agree. I think it's just the
I'd make a motion to recommend denial.
I'll second it.
Motion made to recommend denial, and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes, recommend denial due to the fact there's too close and too much of a request for variance. Okay, this is, a special permit for Asside, Mamone. It's represented on 1774, 177 Middlesex Street, which is, an address that we're familiar with, for the outdoor sale of used vehicles according to section 12.6B of the zoning ordinance. As we know, this matter's been before us with the property that's been, we just recommend for rezoning in our last public hearing. This matter here is, the present use is installation and sale of automotive electronic device, and now they want to sell automotive sales outdoor. Appears that they're gonna sell cars?
Yeah, they want to sell cars, and it's really,
Question is, how many? I think what it says, display vehicle on the plan, it shows 2.
two.
But is it limited to selling 2 cars, or is it more? I don't know.
This opens up what we want to pay these in the past. 2 gross to 10, gross to 15.
You know, I don't, for the outdoor sale of used cars, of used vehicles, excuse me. Actually, I think he has 2, but I know it's tough to, and strict how to maintain how many cars are up there for sale at a given point in time.
Can you put a limit on the number of?
I don't know how that,
Yeah, there's
I
something
think they
for
get
the-
licensed for a certain number of vehicles that they can
yeah,
sell.
I don't know if it's under a certain amount.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if they can.
George, Aaron, you know how that works? Is the license like under a certain number of cars? I remember before we used to have it because we used to have a member on the board who was familiar with that, and they used to update us as it went along. I think it was like under 5 or something they were over, when Mr. Jeffrey was on the board with us, he used to have that communication down for us. Because here it appears to be only 2, but then if you give it to them, the question is, how many can you actually put on there? And the question we'd have would be, what number are you looking for? You know, I think, knowing that if it was 1 or 2, you'd say maybe not too bad, but, you know, same for vehicles, doesn't give us a number, kind of tough. And then the question is, once you got 1 or 2, where do you stop it? And then where to go from there, so.
I don't know. I don't
Okay,
know
no
what the
problem.
licensing is.
Mr. Chairman, I
don't feel comfortable voting for it unless know those answers.
I was going to say I would make a motion that we wouldn't make a recommendation based on the limited information that we have. Yeah.
Okay, so no recommendation at this point in time due to the fact we don't know how many cars are gonna be there, what the limited amount of service would be, and without further information, the board is not in favor of making a recommendation.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion made and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes, okay. Next matter is on This is special permit for Aaron and Paul Yates, and this is the Backyard Collaborative. And this is property located at 278 Central Street. This is in the downtown mixed unit zoning to change existing use of boarding house to 12 residential units according to Article 12, Section 12.1E of the zoning ordinance. This is known as, what's it, J.P. Turner's, I think it is, the name of it, Turner's. I forget the initials of it, but,
The outside.
yeah, I know exactly where it is. Worked in the district court there for a long time. It's changed ownership a few times. But as it is now, they have boarding houses upstairs where a lot of people send their social security checks right to the owner, and he takes care of their housing and their meals downstairs. Yeah. We had a couple of people who visit us quite often at the district court. So the question was, he wants to change, and I know he had a letter saying he had parking over on Jackson Street or something.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I don't know how.
My question relates to the
Existing structure is a national landmark shape and size of lot, existing use and
unit
is developed.
size.
Right.
The unit sizes are like 350 plus or minus 25 square feet, which is terribly small.
The back of that building now.
And he's looking for a variance for that, I
Right.
guess.
If you come to the back of that building now, it looks like all the siding's either been ripped off or burnt, where the dumpsters are. I mean,
Really?
it's deteriorated back there big time, yeah. I mean, because you have where Gary Law office is, and then you pull up there, and when you look at that light there, the back of it, where the dumpsters are, it's like, either the siding was ripped off at one time, or burnt and melted, but maybe that's a reason for the fix-up, but right now, the building's not in the best repair, at least from the backside. I mean, the front is not bad, but, did he say, how many did he have in here now?
28,
Yeah.
28 rooms as a boarding.
Yeah, partial restoration of exterior, structural repairs, and gut rehabs floors I don't know, it looks like a 3 to 4, then cross out 3 to a 2 to 4.
I guess I have mixed feelings, Mr. Chairman. I mean, quite frankly, in a city such as this, there is a need for boarding houses. If you're gonna make it actual condominium units, I think the units should probably be a little larger.
Yeah,
You know, I have some issue with the size of the units.
Small. And what is this, in this correspondence here about this variance? 750 square feet. The owner is requesting relief from this requirement through the existing lot size and shape.
He's got a minimum of 750 square feet to maintain, and the units are under that.
I think he's saying provided is 400, that's awfully small.
They're all under 400.
They're all under 400.
Right, plus or minus, yeah.
350 square feet, most of the
Yeah,
units.
That's
yeah.
10 feet by 36 feet.
I mean, that's,
That's in one row. That's,
yeah. I'd love to see something with that building, but I think that,
it's a beautiful old building.
Yeah, I mean, it's been there for a long time, like they say, because, what do they say, went to the,
It's on the historical
List, yeah.
Historical register too, the National Register.
oh yeah, no, I said it was reported, was it President Lincoln and Jack Kerouac had reported stayed in the building in his former life, so.
The rooms were bigger then.
well, they said people weren't as tall back then.
Oh, I should get into a time machine and go back.
I don't know. You know, they made those comments in the past, I'm like, what? I don't know. You know? I guess that's how short-sheeted started. I don't know. Or was that just a dorm thing?
So he's specifically asking for what? Let's see.
Oh, boy.
So he's only asking to change the existing use?
The Farragut Hotel, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I think he's changed it, but I think he's looking because he doesn't have the size requirements, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's looking for a variance. That's pretty significant.
I mean, yeah, you know, like I said, he needs 750 and he wants 400 plus, yeah, at least
That's
needed,
too
yeah.
much.
I mean, without further information from the applicant, it appears that the units he's requesting are too small, per se.
Yeah.
I mean, you,
I would make a motion to deny based on that fact.
I'll second.
okay, motion's made and second to deny. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Without further information and now being able to look at, you know, the units being so small and the relief that they're requesting is a great amount of square footage.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just too small.
Moving along, do we have any correspondences either from the board members or from Division Plan and Development? Aaron, any updates for us that we should consider from anything?
No, that's about it. George went over most of the agenda for the next meeting. There's one item that will be on for your review. It is a minor change to 760 Merrimack Street, except they have not constructed the change yet. So it actually will be a review of a change, proposed change, not a constructed change. But it is pretty minor, and actually looking at it, maybe an improvement to the parking lot. So other than that, I think that's it for now.
Right, so we'll have that one, the one that George is coming in on, and the matter that was continued tonight, Marginal Street, right? That should keep us busy.
Yeah.
Okay. Here, no other further communication from any board members. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Good night. Thank you, everyone. Good night, everybody.